Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining once again. As I mentioned earlier, my name is Gayatri and I head the Oracle Partner Sales for SuneraTech. Just a small gist about SuneraTech. SuneraTech is a leading Oracle Cloud Velocity partner and a trusted cloud managed services provider. And we help customers accelerate innovation in the cloud. We deliver strategic insights-driven solutions by adopting emerging enterprise technologies to ensure our clients are ahead in the competitive curve. Today, we are presenting our views on data center migrations to cloud at zero upfront cost. The speakers are Srinivas Chitrapu and Paul Desborough. Srinivas is an experienced technology leader with a demonstrated history of working in the information technology and services industry. In SuneraTech, he's our cloud BU head focusing on digital transformation, cloud migration, and cloud managed services. We also have with us Paul Desborough. Paul Desborough is a leader, is from Oracle, and he's a leader specializing in IT channel strategies that support enterprise, corporate, and public sector institutions. Just a little housekeeping before we get started and move up. I open the floor for the presenters to start. If you have any questions during the presentations, please type them onto the question box in your Zoom control panel. I will bring them up during the presentation, and we'll also have time for the questions at the end. Without further any delay, I'll turn it over to the presenters. Srinivas, do you want to begin?
Yep. Thank you, Gayatri. Thanks for joining, folks. Along with Paul and I, we also have Srikant Pakala on the call today, and he'll be helping field some of the Q&A that we've got later on. We have a pretty packed agenda. We can talk about, SuneraTech and cloud's partnership in the cloud space. How our skills and our strengths complement. We certainly want to focus a lot on why organizations should migrate to the cloud, strategic and tactical reasons. How we, SuneraTech and Oracle, partnered to execute one of the largest cloud migrations in the recent past. And we'll talk about our experiences, many of the challenges that you will face as you go into your cloud journeys. Very important, we talk about how we built a business case with a zero cost model. Many of you are going to be in the same boat that we were in terms of the business challenges, in terms of the fiscal challenges, and how we structured the overall value proposition in making the successful engagement. We'll also talk about how you can get started on your data center migration journey. And of course, we'll have at least 15-20 minutes towards the end for Q&A. So quick overview of Sonera Technologies. We are one of the largest cloud partners for Oracle. We are a multi-cloud vendor, but we certainly align very closely with Oracle Cloud. We have over 300 team members who focus on Oracle Cloud from an architecture, engineering, and development perspective. Our customers and we have partnered to win multiple cloud innovation awards for the journeys that we have partnered with them on. Experience with over 700 workloads we migrated to cloud. Oracle applications, IBM, Microsoft, pretty much every application out there that's leveraged today in the IT landscape. We have a global presence that allows us to deliver a 24/7 managed services capability with different SLAs, different capabilities across application, infrastructure, and database. Paul? So a little bit about Oracle Cloud. Again, how SuneraTech leverages Oracle Cloud's technologies to develop and build solutions. And Oracle Cloud has got 4 platforms: infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service, and data as a service. And for those who know Oracle, obviously the company was founded on the base of database, Oracle database, and delivering database as a service is one of the key components of their solution. Oracle Cloud has got 3 offerings. One is supporting cloud at customer, a public cloud, and then supporting customers with their private cloud as well. So we have partnered together on multiple journeys. We're going to go through one of the case studies that'll help everyone understand the key challenges in undertaking a large-scale data center migration. But again, this is how our capabilities and expertise align. Oracle provides us the technology, the capability to onboard solutions, and SuneraTech takes those technologies and develops solutions for migration, whether it be workloads at company data center. We do deliver managed services as well. Very importantly, at the end of the day, it's about your success as a customer migrating to cloud and ensuring that all the logistics, the technical requirements, and the financial requirements are met. So this includes the compliance requirements from a business standpoint, a complete RACI in making sure that we have the right roles and responsibilities assigned, and obviously escalating anything through the implementation and migration effort. So very importantly, why, today's objectives, we're going to cover in 3 areas. Understand why organizations should migrate their data center to cloud, what it takes to migrate, key lessons, experiences you'll benefit from, what you will want to consider as you embark on a data center migration, and ultimately the business case as well.
Yeah. Srinivas, before we move in, I think we have Paul. Paul, do you want to add in a few aspects to the partnership?
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me, Gayatri?
Yeah, I can hear you, Paul.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Yes, I think the only thing I would add would be that the fact that Oracle's success metrics around cloud align perfectly to SuneraTech's success metrics as it aligns to the partner's journey, or excuse me, the customer's journey to the cloud. So I just wanted to share how your capabilities around cloud match up to what Oracle is looking for in an Oracle partner, and it provides a perfect pathway to success.
Thanks, Paul.
Absolutely. Thank you. So first thing is, in 2019, cloud is mainstream. And whether you read the Gartner reports or Forrester or McKinsey, ultimately 95% of customers will migrate to cloud. And by 2021, that's where we're looking at everything being. By 2025, 80% of companies will completely exit from their data center. So no traditional data center, no colo, everything's going to be cloud-based. And even today, a majority of the customers and enterprises do have a hybrid presence. So while they haven't completely exited the data center quite yet, they're embarking on that journey, and a significant portion of their workloads are already in cloud. So they're well on their way. They have a strategy. Now it's a question of just executing on the strategy over time. And that's what we're going to discuss today, what it takes to execute on the strategy. Ultimately, all industries are migrating. It's not just limited to retail or financial services, healthcare, energy, manufacturing. All industry verticals are migrating to cloud. Today, it is mature. It addresses all compliance requirements from a security perspective. It is fully supported, both in terms of managed services, also in terms of capabilities of monitoring and security. So what are some of the business drivers? And on the left, you'll see the IT drivers, and on the right, you'll see business drivers. Where they overlap is cost. Both IT and business want to reduce costs associated with IT spend, and cloud is a good way to move away from the CapEx, the traditional tech refresh and project lifecycle, to a much more efficient model that's more scalable. From an IT perspective, it is all about efficiency and agility. It's about scalability and shifting focus from operations to delivering services. Also from an IT perspective, there's typically a huge tech debt that most IT organizations have. And repurposing applications, modernization of these applications is key as you move towards more of a microservices model. From a business perspective, it's about innovation, driving revenue, driving more products into the market, and marketing as well. And this is where businesses leverage from AI, ML, data monetization, obviously, and improving the experiences of their customers, employees, and partners. Ultimately, cloud is the foundation for disrupting businesses. If you look at even in the most recent past, whether it be Uber or Airbnb, Netflix, they have moved to a completely cloud-based model. They've their business model, what they offer, what they take to market is cloud-based, and they deliver services on top of that. They have very little infrastructure that they own. They have very little corporate overhead. Manufacturing is obviously a key when it comes to moving to cloud. Industry 4.0 is something that's already been touted for the last 2 years as manufacturers move towards an IoT-based supply chain model. So now we know why customers are moving to cloud. The drivers is focus on what it takes to migrate a data center to cloud. So through this section, we're going to go over a case study, and it is probably one of the largest data center migrations to cloud, probably the largest to Oracle Cloud for sure. Over a period of 8 months, we migrated 85 applications to cloud in 7 waves, and very importantly, done at zero cost upfront. There are 700 VMs that were migrated, ranging from VMware to Hyper-V to LDOMs on Spark Solaris. So pretty complex model. And all of this was successfully migrated over a period of 8 months. And we'll talk about what it takes in terms of the planning and the execution to execute something on this scale. A little more about this case study. The customer was spending $10.4 million per year for the IT infrastructure that was migrated to cloud. By partnering with Oracle and leveraging SuneraTech managed services, we were able to reduce that cost by 58%, going from 10.4 down to 4.4 per year. We did it through automation by migrating all their infrastructure to cloud, moving away from a blue stack more towards a cloud-based stack in Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. As you can see in terms of landscape, they had a pretty significant Oracle footprint. Paul, you want to add anything to this part?
CI Cloud really provided the best value point with return on investment made by the customer. From an OCI data center lift and shift execution, it really provided a seamless transition for the customer as well.
Yeah, that was key in terms of picking the right cloud. The workloads here heavily tilted towards Oracle applications, EBS, supply chain, transport manager, JD Edwards, PeopleSoft. The licensing model, the support model, all of those gravitated towards Oracle Cloud, and SuneraTech's expertise in migrating these applications was key as well. So a very good partnership indeed. So ultimately, this customer was looking to disrupt their industry vertical, similar to what other companies have done in their businesses, looking to benefit from the agility. Certainly the cost savings, that $6 million that was saved can now be spent towards innovation, towards additional products, and towards going into different markets as well. So we discussed the overall scope in terms of technology stack, the 85 applications, the 700 VMs, the multiple data centers, and the types of workloads. But key to the success of this, and many of you'll see that these points will resonate with your experiences as well. The project had to complete by November 30th. If not, the organization was going to see a significant increase in the IT spend by $1 million a month. There was no budget in the current fiscal year. So even though the project had to complete by November 30th, there was no funding available till October 1st for the migration effort. Very importantly, from an application standpoint, they're running on aged hardware that desperately required tech refresh, application stack that had to be upgraded as well. So all of these had to be factored in. And these are typically challenges most companies will face. When you're looking to migrate your data center, there will be a deadline, there will be budget limitations, and there will be other support considerations that come into play. So first step is, we analyze their workloads. Again, EBS, the PeopleSoft, the underlying infrastructure platform, the operating systems, the fact that they have tape backup that goes away. And based on these, the applications were categorized into waves. The waves are what we use from project perspective. So there were multiple waves in this case, based on the dependencies and integrations, the business cycles. There was a deadline, but certain applications couldn't be moved towards the end of the fiscal quarter, and certain applications were heavily dependent on during payroll season. The waves also determined in terms of business criticality, and then the waves had to be aligned and timed based on the 8-month cycle we had. So again, the complexity, the integrations, and the business dependencies are what goes into determining the number of waves and the sequence of the waves as well. Once the applications are analyzed, once the waves have been determined and defined, typically applications fall into 4 categories when we look to migrate them. There's a traditional lift and shift, where there's very little modification. It's just basically taking the data from the data center and moving it to cloud. There's a re-platform, where you're changing the underlying operating system, changing the underlying infrastructure, possibly also moving from a legacy environment to a more 3-tier architecture. There's also cross-platform and upgrade considerations that come into play. And ultimately, there's also refactor, where certain applications will not be a lift and shift, but be replaced by SaaS and PaaS services that are native to cloud. So next are the key considerations. So anytime an organization undertakes a cloud journey, whether it be a handful of workloads or complete data center, these are the areas that need to be considered. The first, a strategic partnership. And like Paul was alluding to as well earlier, the partnership between the customer, Oracle, SuneraTech was key, and other support vendors as well. So that has to be defined. A long-term vision has to be in place. 8 months may seem like a relatively short time, but we had to go beyond that as well. So the 8 months were just migrating away from traditional data center into cloud, but there's a roadmap beyond those eight months. A complete cloud strategy, we discussed the workflow analysis, picking the right cloud. In this case, there's a hybrid cloud play as well. So majority of the workloads, all the Oracle applications went to Oracle Cloud. There was some Microsoft footprint that went to Azure, and 1 or 2 very specific applications that ended up on AWS. So a multi-cloud strategy is critical. It's hybrid to some extent as well, because there's certain applications that, because of compliance reasons, had to stay back in-house at a colo or on-prem. So that was factored in as well. Paul, anything you want to add to the first 2?
Perfect example of Oracle, SuneraTech, and the customer making a joint investment and being completely interlocked in all stages, in all 6 stages of the planning to ensure a successful cloud execution.
Thanks, Paul. So once you've identified your strategy, your vision, a proof of value is key. A proof of value is going to help you build your runbooks, understand the dependencies, a lot of the logistics issues that come in regarding network and access that you can't run into until you actually start doing an upgrade. So in this case, we did a proof of value in migrating the development EBS environment to cloud first. It was not big because it was easy. It was big because it's probably one of the most complex of the undertakings here, migrating from Spark, Solaris to Oracle Linux. But it gave the customer and Oracle and SuneraTech very valuable insight into the performance expectations, the rate of data transfer, and all the integrations that had to be considered, some of which could be missed during the discovery phase. The proof of architecture also helps build a solid architecture foundation. In addition to traditional compute, storage, and network, you have to factor in security and disaster recovery. And no application can be migrated to cloud unless that plumbing is in place. The plumbing is essentially the network infrastructure, including firewall, load balancers, and all the routing. The security infrastructure for penetration testing, for securing endpoints, and for vulnerability management, as well as a disaster recovery capability. So once the framework is in place, you can essentially start plugging and playing applications as they migrate. The next thing is data protection. Whether it be encryption for data at rest, but more importantly, it's data backup and recovery. Traditional data centers leverage tape for the most part and a vaulting strategy. That translates to backup to object storage and archive strategy instead. In both cases, the compliance requirements are met. Very importantly, plan the waves. In terms of the sequence, like I mentioned earlier, 85 applications, they have to be divided, the right number of applications per wave, working around the business cycles as well. So once you have a solid foundation in terms of planning, once the architecture, the vision, the runbooks, all of those are in play, you can start executing on the migration. But this is, devil's in the details, like they say. So there'll be additional challenges that you'll run into during the migration. And the first one is compatibility. It's easy to map migrating VMware to KVM or an LDOM to KVM, but in reality, there's challenges run into that, whether you use Revelo or some other migration methodology, you'll possibly test and try to make sure it's working. This is where the proof of value comes into play as well. The next is performance. The proof of values, complex, but somewhat on a small scale, is when you start migrating multiple applications in parallel that you realize the volume of data. Once again, network connectivity and latency is key. If not, you're at risk of missing your deadlines. The next thing is all the software agents. Once all the security tools, DR tools, the backup agents are deployed, you start seeing that many of these tools can take up considerable amount of CPU and memory, if not properly tuned and deployed. So those have to be factored and tested as well. There's always custom applications, which could fall into one of the 4 categories that we discussed earlier, lift and shift all the way to replatform. And this is where tribal knowledge comes in. We have run into situations where the original CDs are not available. The licensing was dependent on the CDs. So we had to literally move the virtual machine as is, copy it bit by bit, because we couldn't find the original CDs, and we couldn't install new licenses. And sometimes the vendor is not even around because these applications are so old. There's very little support available. The next is infrastructure services. Once again, you might have a very, very well thought out security strategy, but the compatibility is required. You got to make sure, the firewall port, the multiple levels of security when it comes to network and application and URLs, they do not impact the functionality of an application. This is where the load balancers come in play as well. Execution, we had every weekend, every cutover very carefully planned, but yet in some of our biggest windows, we had to switch to a plan B. Not because of lack of planning, it's just because you run into issues that are not identified. So always have a plan B and a team in place for that plan B, where, assuming that a backup and restore is taking much longer than originally anticipated, or some kind of connectivity is not in place. The next thing is a transition. You got to make sure that as the migration completes, the team that's executing the migration stays on through the transition into the managed services and sustaining support model. If the migration team disconnects right at the completion of migration, you lose a lot of the knowledge and experience that's required. So when doing the planning, every organization has multiple teams, one for migrating, one for supporting. It's critical the migrating team stays on through the initial period of the support cycle. So we've discussed why customers are moving to cloud. We have discussed what it takes to complete a migration, a very well thought out strategy, all the considerations. You have a very good plan. Now you got to build a business case.
So, Srinivas, sorry to interrupt. So before we move forward, do you want to take a few questions?
I have any comment, Gayatri, on the web?
Yeah, Frank has asked a few questions. He's asked, how many applications were rehosted and lift and shift respectively in the largest data center migration that we were mentioning? He wants to understand how many applications were rehosted and lift and shifted.
Yeah, good question. So on the 85 that we mentioned, everything that was Windows running on Windows 2012 or Red Hat 6 and above which is, I believe, about 1/3 weaker lift and shift. There was no changes. The remaining had to be migrated from, so it's the 50 and remaining 50 plus, had to migrate from Spark Solaris to Linux. And then there was a lot of Windows upgrades required as well, because many of the applications were running on Windows 2008, that far back. Now, there were some that were not supported, which fall into the tribal knowledge category. And there, though it was Windows 2008, though it was on a very old platform, we literally had to bring in a new tool to copy the application bit by bit into the new environment and in what is known as an emulation mode. So again, about 30 plus lift and shift, Windows 2012, Red Hat, Linux 6, simple, easy migration, no compatibility issues. Of the remaining 50 and odd, about half of them was Spark Solaris, the big EBS footprints, PeopleSoft footprint. They had to be re-platformed from that to Linux, a more long-term support model. And then the remaining were just kind of literally lift and shift in terms of bit copies, not virtual machine moves. Because these all applications weren't running in virtual machines, they're running on physical hardware directly. Any other questions, Gayatri?
Yeah, sure, Srinivas. Thank you. One more question. How do we choose between a single cloud or a multi-cloud provider? Was that process, did that come up during this, for this client?
Yes. So, in terms of complexity, it's best to have a single cloud provider. This makes things much simpler, right? But most customers will have Exchange or Outlook or SharePoint, and these services, these applications are much better suited for Azure, right? So there's no point in running them in Oracle Cloud just for the sake of. In the same way, all the Oracle applications, from a support standpoint, from a licensing standpoint, from a performance standpoint, they will gravitate towards Oracle Cloud. And we also put together a TCO. So we looked at the different cost models. We put a BOM together with an all Oracle stack and all AWS stack. And Azure was already decided they were going to move to Office 365. So that was put aside. But when you look at, again, the licensing capabilities, when you look at the ratios, when you look at the different models for supporting databases, Oracle came out on top because this customer had a very large Oracle database footprint. And most cases, there's another, so I mentioned, cloud is mainstream earlier. There's another, report showing that multi-cloud is the new norm. Companies don't want to invest everything in one cloud. They want to use the best cloud. Cloud is virtual, and if you're going to, by de facto stick to one cloud, then you're losing out on a lot of the benefits of the flexibility the cloud offers. The true essence, cloud should be invisible, and that's why all MSPs who are now CSPs will support multi-cloud transparently. That's the way it needs to be. So it doesn't matter whether an application hosted in AWS or OCI or Azure. Ultimately, it's the support that counts and the experience to the end user that matters. Any other questions, Rathik?
No, Srinivas, please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. So IT has skills, certainly an approach, a lot of capability in migrating to cloud, and certainly has probably migrated multiple workloads. When it comes to migrating a complete data center, one, it's not cheap. Two, there's certainly risk involved anytime you're undertaking such a huge task, even with all the planning. So the business is often good with status quo, do nothing kind of a mindset, where it's, investment in time, 8 months is pretty significant amount given the amount of resources that need to be tied up. And obviously a migration to cloud, there's a disruption that needs to be considered. So oftentimes there's triggering points that allow the IT to begin this discussion on the journey if it's not business driven. One is if your data center is up for renewal. That's a great time to start looking at a cloud strategy, because the cost of migrating from one data center to another is also not insignificant. It's quite a bit. Along the same lines, you might have a tech refresh challenge, and rather than go back to this traditional model of the 90s and early 2000s, where every 3 to 5 years, customers are looking to upgrade hardware. Now you move away from that kind of a model. You focus more on services. So ultimately, to convince the business, you got to show that the time and effort, there's an ROI to that, and dispel a lot of the perception regarding the lack of control with data in cloud, the lack of support. All of that is dispelled. So we'll go more into the zero cost later on, but the gist of the zero cost cloud migration solution is, one, you can realize all the benefits of cloud, all the reasons that we learned about earlier in terms of the TCO, the business drivers, the IT drivers, but without any additional investment upfront. It takes away one significant barrier to migrating, which is the cost associated with it. And as you'll see, post-migration, I mean, this customer saved $6 million, 58%. Post-migration, the savings that you gain year over year more than pay for any effort and investment in the migration itself. So here's what it essentially looks like. In the do nothing model for this customer, they were going to see their support costs rise significantly, right? And one was the end of the contract and the new contract that had to be put in place, and then the growth you'll see over time. In a traditional migration, you'll see over here that there's a bit of a bubble. This is the cost of investing, and it's not insignificant. It's quite a bit. Depending on the IT budget, it could be 25% of the year's IT budget just to complete the migration over a period of 6 to 8 to 9 months. And this bubble is difficult to justify in many cases. So with zero cost, what happens is the bubble goes away. The customer doesn't pay SuneraTech anything, right? They continue to pay the current vendor, whatever they are. They start seeing the benefits of cloud and the savings kick in, and ultimately there'll be a stabilization period. Over time, very importantly, is this gap between traditional IT in a colo or a data center and the cost of growth and support in cloud, this gap continues to increase, right? Just because you can incrementally procure infrastructure here, but anytime you're in a traditional model, you'll have to procure in large quantities of a significant investment. Forget about the procurement cycle of going through the data center, acquiring space and power. So this, again, a huge benefit of zero cost migration that SuneraTech offers. And this is how it works. SuneraTech will sign a managed service agreement with a customer. So in this case, it was a 5-year agreement. We partnered with Oracle, procured all the cloud infrastructure upfront. So Oracle did not have any issues with, or any challenges with building the tenancy, but the customer didn't have to pay SuneraTech for the cloud consumption for the 8 months of migration. All the services, staffing, and effort put in those 8 months for the migration, they didn't have to pay anything. It was only after the migration completed, which is, go back to this previous slide here. And only at this point did the customer start paying Sonera Technologies, and they start paying their current provider. So at no point did they have to pay 2 invoices. It was always one. The existing invoice kept getting paid to their current provider through the completion of the migration. Migration completes, no more spend with the existing old previous provider, and now it's SuneraTech invoicing them. So what we do is we will procure the cloud infrastructure, pay upfront for all the migration costs, and amortize all these over the period of the life of the contract, essentially. So in this case, it was a 60-month contract, 8 months of migration, 52 months, over which they pay a fixed cost, a very known cost, which could vary a little bit depending on their growth, obviously, but it was more predictable and, very importantly, very easy to budget. And ultimately, they didn't have to put anything up front, and they could defer all the investment and spend to the following fiscal year. So quick thing before we get into Q&A here. The next steps, again, we've discussed why. Everyone's got a pretty good idea of why. What needs to be done, the major considerations, how to build a business case, what it takes, what are the factors that need to be considered. And for any customer looking to migrate their data center or a significant workload into cloud, we do partner, we offer complimentary cloud readiness assessments. We do TCO analysis, help you build a business case. First, totally understand what it's going to take to migrate your data center and your applications to cloud. To what it's going to cost and compare the cost to existing spend. And then if you're already on the journey, you've already done the first two, then we can start looking at proof of value as well, which is typically the next step. Now getting the nitty-gritty of the actual execution. We do have other webinars coming up on security and disaster recovery in cloud. Here's a link to additional webinars that are coming up in early January and into February as well. So with that, we'll open up for QA. Just a quick thing, if you want a copy of this presentation, just shoot me an email. Happy to send that to you. Happy to talk to you as well. So feel free to reach out to us, and we can have a more custom, plan for you. Have a little more in-depth conversation about your cloud journey. So Gayatri, can we open up for Q&A now?
Sure. The panel is open for questions. Any questions? Srinivas, one question which came up while you were presenting is, does the zero cost migration work only for, is this business model only for OCI?
No, it's not. It's any cloud, including multi-cloud strategy. So the short answer is no. The only mandate for that is, we sign a multi-year managed services contract with the customer, either for infra and or database and or application.
Is the licensing cost included in the zero cost migration?
There's two kinds of licensing costs. Anything that is planned upfront, yes, it is included. Oftentimes during the migration itself, there's additional requirements that come up that the business or IT thinks about, or as a requirement from some kind of a third-party support vendor as well. So those are not included, and those have to be factored in, and oftentimes they might come in at some point during one of the waves. So those are on a case-by-case basis.
Okay. During the cloud migration, we generally, there is a phase where we establish cloud KPIs. Where do you think is it a part of the cloud readiness assessment you mentioned, or is it a part of the TCO analysis?
It's part of the readiness assessment, because you want to make sure that the end state meets all your KPI criteria, and that depending on your KPI criteria, the cost will vary. Right? So, for example, if you want a solid DR strategy with very aggressive RTO, RPO, then that's certainly going to require some additional investment, and which have to be factored into TCO. If an organization wants the capability to scale up and down a little more dynamically, then those services might require a little more effort and cost. And even the security stack, depending on the requirements, we have a standard stack that we deploy to make sure that the cloud tenancy is secure and meets most of the requirements when it comes to GDPR or SOC, even ITAR for that matter. But every now and then, additional requirements come in that have to be factored into TCO as well. So it really has to be an apples-to-apples comparison when it comes to the security, when it comes to the performance and functionality. And when we do the TCO analysis, we typically look at the data center, the cost of the data center or colo, space, power, network feed, the cost of the infrastructure, whether it's depreciated over time, assuming it's a CapEx model. We take into account all the tools required to monitor and manage the infrastructure. We take into account all the resource support required for providing a 24/7 support model. And then finally, the licensing. One of the biggest advantages of moving to cloud is people move away from the expensive VMware licensing to a free virtualization machine that Oracle Cloud and most clouds come with KVM in general or Zen-based model.
What all do you cover as a part of TCO analysis?
So again, the 5 things I mentioned earlier, right? So the first is the data center footprint. That goes away completely when you move to cloud. You no longer have to pay for the space, the power, the network feed, the rack, the resources required to replace disks, CPU, what have you. So that's the first, the data center facility and support. The second is all the infrastructure, comparing the cost of the current infrastructure footprint, network, compute, storage, and any other appliances. That's 2. The third is the resources required to manage and support this environment within the SLA that is targeted. The next is the software licenses required. Comparing the current spend on licenses for virtualization, for monitoring, for security, to what the new stack will look like. So those are 4 primary areas that we look at.
So is it right to assume that this TCO analysis provides a comparison between the current cost and the cost which will be there while after moving to cloud, or it can also provide a cost analysis between 2 cloud providers?
A good question, actually both. So we have done the difference between 2 cloud providers typically comes down to that middle area, right? The infrastructure and the cost of infrastructure. So that's a good point. Yeah. So we do TCO. We do compare. We have 1, the current run rate and current spend rate. 2, the TCO with cloud A, and then 3, the TCO with cloud B, and maybe even a cloud C. So, and that was actually factored in when we executed this customer migration. I mean, given the investment, that was a mandate to compare the costs of the different cloud solutions. Any other questions, Gayatri, coming up in the chat?
No, Srinivas, I think we have questions. So we have time more for questions. Any more questions?
Yeah. And how can they submit the question? The chat is the only way, or is there any other way, Gayatri?
Yeah, there is a Q&A, and if somebody wants, we can also allow them to talk, Srinivas.
Okay, got it.
Other things, another question just come up is, so what are the various migration components that we have to prioritize during a migration?
Could you repeat the question?
The components which we'll have to prioritize while looking for a cloud migration.
So number 1, everything is driven by service, right? Ultimately, IT infrastructure supports applications which support business services. So the number 1 consideration will always be the business process. Something as important as EBS, controls the entire organization's ERP system. PeopleSoft, which includes financial services and HR. So you got to start top down, begin with the business requirement, the business service, how it's supported today, the requirements, and then from there you go, from functionality down to the capacity, and very importantly, the integration as well. That is a key part of consideration during migration. Any application like EBS or PeopleSoft is probably going to have multiple integrations with other vendors, maybe a B2B model with partners as well. So all of those have to be factored in.
Sure, I think that's it with the questions, Srinivas.
Okay.
So thank you all so much for joining this webinar. We will be sharing this recording link in a mail shortly. Thank you so much again. Have a great day. Bye.
Thank you.